Hey leaders, I got a question through LinkedIn about resources or additional guidance on building a key performance indicator, a KPI tree. And there's not a lot of formal resources out there. This is a tool I learned in application. I did find a couple of web-based resources. I'll try to link those out below if you have interest in following up. But what I thought might be helpful is talking through the mechanics of building the KPI tree and then transitioning it into daily management and walking through that with a particular case study. So the intent behind a KPI tree is to understand the factors, so the processes, metrics, and controls that lead to the outcome or the goal that you're trying to achieve. And when we have a gap in performance of that top level goal, that means we need to change something in the requirements, processes, metrics, or controls. So the basic framework of a KPI tree starts up at the top with what we're trying to achieve, change, improve. This should come out of the first phase of the focus and align framework of why we are pursuing change, continuous improvement at all. Once aligned as a leadership team on what we want to go after, we need to link that what we want to get to how we're delivering it today and how we are going to change that in the future. This tree structure makes it easy to visualize the linkage between the requirements and the outcome or the result that we're pursuing. So we start at the top level and we identify an outcome, a result, a goal that we're able to measure. Then as a team, cross-functionally, we think about, in our business, what do we have in terms of requirements to deliver that? That means what needs to be true to achieve this goal? How do we realize that outcome today? And this is where the KPI tree may be unique to your organization based upon industry, based upon organizational structure. Once we understand the requirements that need to be fulfilled, then we go in each one of those requirements areas and brainstorm the enabling processes that deliver that requirement. For each of those processes, we go down a layer deeper than that and establish what metrics are in place to monitor the performance of that process. And where there is, we have controls in place. So we say what control is in place to ensure the sufficient output of this process to satisfy this requirement that ensures we're on track for meeting the goal. So to make this a little bit less abstract, maybe we could talk through an example. If I start at my top level of the KPI tree and say in a production facility, my goal is to improve or achieve a target level of on-time delivery. So on-time delivery would be the goal that goes to the top of the KPI tree. To achieve on-time delivery, I need some requirements. Some things need to be true to ensure that I am delivering my product on time to customer requirements. To simplify, we need materials to build or assemble our product. We need people to operate the equipment, to assemble the parts, to move materials. We need equipment in those areas to perform the work, to move the equipment, to load the parcels. And we need a schedule that tells us what to build when. If we have material available, people there to build it, equipment that's operating, and an accurate schedule, we will achieve on-time delivery. Now, each of these requirements might have a monitoring metric associated with that. Let's say material, we're looking at material availability. We could also look at things like stockouts. In people, we might look at things like available, or maybe we look at absenteeism. So we're monitoring whether or not we have the right people there on a given day. Equipment, a pretty industry standard measurement, is overall equipment effectiveness, OEE, which is a percentage of time that the machine is operating at the appropriate rate, producing a quality part. And the last one would be schedule. So one of my favorite metrics here is schedule adherence. Did we build what we planned to in the quantity that was on the schedule? So let's dig down into each of these requirements and break it down to process level. So if we start with material, we could break that down and say, well, how do we ensure that we have the right material available? One of the things that drives this is having an accurate bill of materials. So that is a process that we have. The release and the approval of a bill of materials is something that ensures that we have the right parts. So that as we transact this through our MRP or our ERP system after production, we are triggering the replenishment of what has been consumed. So one way to test the accuracy of our bill of materials is to look into a metric of variance reporting. So variance reporting could indicate an inaccuracy in the bill of materials. It could indicate some level of quality or scrap, in process rework that's happening. And maybe we also have a control. Do we perform iterative audits, some cadence of audit of the bill of materials, observing what's being consumed and replenished in the system. Now, having an accurate bill of materials is great. We also need to have a plan for when we need to and how we need to replenish those parts. So a plan for every part that might cover a percentage of our inventory. Shooting for 100% might not be the right answer. Maybe do an ABC analysis on this. But in that case, if we're planning the right quantities based upon consumption and lead time to replenish, our storage conditions and capacity and container size, we can identify, do we have the right amount of material on hand? And we can measure that in terms of things like inventory turns or stockouts in a given year. So that we have an accurate bill of materials, an effective plan for every part, and then maybe lastly, are we achieving internal processes that we expect? So is the receiving process meeting the lead time that we expect? So dock to stock, maybe looking at on-time deliveries, maybe looking at incoming inspection rates or quality rates to ensure that we're getting the right materials to meet the plan that was set up to satisfy the bill of materials. If those processes are all operating, we should deliver material at the right level of availability. If we move over to people, we need to have people available at the right time. So we could look at absenteeism in terms of a rate, or we could look at availability of people on a given day or across a production period, a week, a month. To make sure that we have the right people available, first we need to hire and recruit them. So we might look at something like vacancy number or vacancy percentage of roles that we have. To satisfy that process, right, of hiring and recruiting, we might look at things like lead time. What's the time to fill a particular position? We might look at the number of applicants per vacancy. So when we do announce, how many people do we get applying for that particular role? And we might also be measuring attrition rate, right? So can we keep up with the rate that we're losing or we have churn within the organization? Another thing to look at here is hiring them in is great. We also need to develop them. So in terms of our training and development, there might be an onboarding lead time, so like days till independently effective. And we can measure that in terms of our processes, in terms of things like skills matrix. So what percent coverage do we have? Maybe percent coverage at a level 3 or a level 4 level of certification if you think about Harvey balls. You might look at bench strength and key roles, so the number of people that are capable to operate key processes, key pieces of equipment. And then maybe a third one is your resource plan. So do I know what is required to operate? So when I have a production schedule, do I know the number of people and the skills required to operate for that day? And then am I managing that? Maybe some sort of control, looking at vacation planning. So I'm looking out over 2 weeks and making sure I have the right mix and number of people to operate the equipment. A third thing is equipment. So we can look at overall equipment effectiveness. Within that, I'm probably looking at broke fix. So that's time to repair. I can look at lead time or measure downtime in terms of broke fix repairs. In terms of the enabling processes that or metrics that are measuring that enabling process, could be things like turnaround time, so that'd be time from call to response or time from response to return to service. I could also look at things like spare part availability, because that could impact my ability to get the equipment back online in a reasonable time frame. In addition to broke fix, I also want to be thinking about my preventive maintenance and calibration plan. Now, pushing off preventive maintenance on key equipment is never a good long-term strategy. So we might look at things like percent of reschedule. So how often am I replanning that because I'm prioritizing getting the day's production over my PM plan? Or can I plan some of that preventive maintenance and calibration for off shifts or off production time? And I can also look at things like turnaround time. Am I completing the preventive maintenance in the time that's allotted? I could also look at rate. So the three components of OEE, right, are quality, rate, and availability. So we're talking about availability here a lot. If we think about rate, can I measure the individual rates of the pieces of equipment? Am I producing at rate when the equipment is up and running? So those could lead into helping us identify, do we have an equipment and OEE issue that we're going after? Maybe a fourth branch here is schedule. So I can have material and people and equipment, but if I don't know what to produce when or in what sequence, it's going to be a problem to deliver on time. My favorite metric here is schedule adherence. Look at the schedule that we have for a given day, a given week, and say, is that what we produced in those quantities? To be able to achieve a schedule adherence, one, we need an accurate forecast. As I look out over a planning horizon, a month, a quarter, a year, do I know what volumes I'm planning to produce so I can work that into my capacity? And I can start to build out things like attack time. Can my process keep up with the demand that I'm forecasting? Do I need to add more available production time, or do I need to take cycle time out of key processes? Another thing is, so I have my forecast, then I have to look at my available days. So what holidays and days off and vacation time is being allotted, and do I have the necessary number of production days remaining? So I can look at things like calendar days, my shift schedule, my overtime plan, or my overtime budget to see, do I have enough working time to satisfy the forecast to meet the schedule? And another thing, we haven't talked about quality at all. I like to fit it under this, is saying quality rate, because even if I'm hitting my production plan, if I have a quality rate issue, that may mean I'm producing at the capacity I needed, but if I have 5% fallout, 10% fallout, I can no longer keep up with the schedule because the capacity needs that excess 10%. So I can measure things like rework rates and scrap rates at key process steps. Now, developing the KPI tree is going to be unique for your organization. And at this point, we dig in to say, well, where do I have a problem? Where is my metric or my control for those enabling processes not delivering what I expect? So we can start from the top down and identify a red thread that connects. If I have a gap in my goal, that means one of my enabling requirements is not being met. Let's say I'm not meeting on-time delivery because I'm not hitting my schedule, because my forecast accuracy was off, because I had improper capacity planning. Great. That's one thread that I can look through in my improvement plan and say, now, how do I get to a better improvement? Is those are the areas I want to focus on. It may be that you have more than one red area on your KPI tree, and that's okay. But this is a good opportunity to focus and align, pick key areas, not everything, to focus on first, and bring those processes back into control, the metrics back on track, so that we can deliver the requirements and achieve the goal. I hope this walkthrough helped. And to address the question I had directly, we might not get it right the first time. This does require a depth of knowledge of your process and an understanding of this thinking way to get better. But I hope that you try applying this in your own business. And if you have questions about any other content that I put out, happy to talk about it. And I think together we can work on improving less and getting better results.